Hello and welcome to Louis-Philippe in Pursuit of Excellence. My guest today is truly an Indian original. She's arguably the #1 businesswoman in the country. My good friend Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. Kiran, great to see you. You look well after all your travels. Doesn't no jet lag, nothing affects you?
Well, it's all a facade, Vijay. But thank you so much. It's a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you very much for joining us. I mean, I've been following your story for years. I mean, you started your company way back when. We're going to get into that in a minute. But tell us about your early growing up in Bangalore. You're very much a Bangalore citizen, a Bangaloreite, I should call you. You're growing up, schooling, college, everything here?
Well, I was born in Bangalore. I'm a very proud Bangalorean. And I had a very charmed childhood, I would say, because, I grew up in this lovely garden city of Bangalore. It truly was a wonderful, charming, retirees' paradise or whatever you might call it. But I had a wonderful childhood. I went to Bishop Cotton Girls' School. I then followed it up with a pre-university degree from Mount Carmel College. And then I later on went to finish my, zoology honors, my BSc in zoology honors from Central College, Bangalore University. So those were my growing up years in Bangalore.
And then you went off overseas to do further education and pursued that line of education?
Yes, I did something very unusual. I then, after my BSc zoology honors, I decided to go and pursue brewing and fermentation science in Australia, which I think was pretty unconventional at that time.
Yes, but it's completely left field. I mean, when you were getting ready to do this, did you have any input from your parents? Did dad or mom say, what are you thinking here?
Well, actually, it was my father who actually influenced this particular thought process. He was a brewmaster with United Breweries in Bangalore, and he was very keen that one of his children sort of almost follows his footsteps. And I remember, when I was planning to, look at my further studies, and I said, what should I be doing? I was very interested in applied science. And when I discussed this with my father, he said, why don't you, pursue brewing? I mean, brewing is a great profession. It has a lot of science, and it is the world's oldest biotechnology. So why don't you go and, pursue brewing? So that's how I went off to Australia and, became India's first qualified brewmaster, female brewmaster.
Incredible. That's an amazing story, because you always think, I'm not going to do what my parents do. They were doctors and lawyers. I'm not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And you went into it. Okay, so you came back from Australia, and you're young, you're energetic, you're full of thoughts and ideas. At what point did that turn into the start of this amazing story of Biocon?
So I came back from Australia, all set to pursue a profession and a career in brewing. I, got myself very engaged in a number of brewing projects as soon as I got back. But then, I started facing a lot of resistance because I found that nobody wanted to hire me in their breweries as a brewmaster. They were very happy to give me assignments or projects which dealt with problem solving. But they were very reluctant to hire me as a full-time brewmaster.
Was it gender mainly?
It was absolutely gender-based. I mean, they basically told me, they said, look, you are very qualified. We respect your expertise. But it is high risk for us to give you, this managerial responsibility, because this is an all-male preserve. And to suddenly introduce a woman into this particular management sphere would be really taking a big risk, because we don't think unions would accept you. We don't think our male colleagues would accept you, bossing over them or taking management decisions in the way you would like to. So I think it becomes very difficult for us to also entrust you with a lot of responsibilities which we believe are something which would be very uncomfortable for a woman to handle. At least that was their perception. And I was very disillusioned, because I felt that I had all the credentials to hold such a post, but then I found that it wasn't going to be possible.
So it wasn't based on merit at that point then?
Absolutely not. So, it was a rude shock to me. I was extremely disappointed that, that my country and my profession wouldn't have me being a part of it. So I had decided at that point in time to really opt for pursuing a brewing career overseas, because I thought maybe I'm more accepted overseas. And of course, fate intervened, and I then started my biotech business instead, and therefore I call myself an accidental entrepreneur.
Who sort of inspired you at that time to be able to get started with your Biocon business, when it's something that you're obviously going a slight change in your thinking, and obviously raising money was going to be a problem, and all of the issues that come with starting your own business?
Well, I was quite self-driven, really. I think at that point in time, I was determined to do it on my own. And I think I did sort of go about setting up my business, by knocking at every bank door. I found that even there, I had these huge credibility hurdles to overcome. I was 25 years old when I started Biocon. I was trying to set up a new sector called biotechnology, which nobody understood. And I had no business background, I had no money, and I had huge credibility hurdles, because people found it very difficult to, lend me money, because they said I was high risk in every way. I found it even more difficult to get people to work for me, because they felt I was high risk in terms of job security. So it was very difficult in those starting years.
So then what made you decide you wanted to be an entrepreneur? I mean, you're facing problems with raising money, you're facing problems with the fact that you're a woman, and you're facing problems with starting a new business that people had never heard of. I mean, that's three big strikes.
Yes. So I think I was determined to make a success. I had to prove it to myself and to others that it was possible to be a successful businesswoman. So I think that is what drove me, that sort of that spirit of challenge and that sense of purpose. That's what really drove me into not giving up. And of course, once I took that kind of approach, I found that there was one banker who loved my story and was willing to extend a credit line to me. There were a few brave people who were willing to join me in my enterprise.
Well, I'm going to back up 1 minute there, because you started originally with 10,000 rupees in your garage of your rented home in Bangalore. What drove you at that point to invest 10,000 rupees, which you probably didn't have at the time? And did Dad give it to you? Were there others who might have been interested in saying, I think she's got the passion, she's got the drive, let's start her up?
The 10,000 rupees were my life savings. Okay, I had saved up 10,000 rupees in my bank, and in those days, in 1978, 10,000 rupees was a lot of money.
Yes.
It was, in those days, I think it was all of, $1,000.
Yes.
Okay. So that's where that 10,000 rupees came from. That was all I had in my bank account. And the garage was the garage of my rented home, because that's all I could afford as an office. And in fact, that became quite a challenge for me as well, because when I wanted to interview people to whom I was potentially going to recruit, they would take one look at this garage and look at it in a very dubious way, saying, is this a company, which has an office in a garage? And so they would take one look at me, and they would even assume I was the secretary and say, hey, we have an interview with the managing director. And the moment I would say that's me, I could see this crestfallen look on their faces, and they'd almost turn down my job immediately.
So, I mean, all of these setbacks, early setbacks that brought you into the banker, kind of revved you up at that point. Did you know where you wanted to be every 12 months or 3 years out?
I think, yes. I think at the early stages, it was 1 year at a time, and I knew what I wanted to do every year to get to where I needed to be. So I knew the kind of risks that I had to take on a year-on-year basis. And I knew the kind of scale-up I had to address on a year-on-year basis. So from that point of view, it was an evolutionary process where it was 1 year at a time.
And obviously, when the bank came in, and Mr. Vagul, I would call him sort of a godfather, to invest in your company, but he didn't actually give you a loan.
No, he actually insisted it should be an equity stake because he was,
so confident of your business.
Yeah, because he was starting this whole concept of venture funding. And so he said to me, he says, look, although you are looking for a loan, he says, I don't want to give you a loan. I'm investing in you. So I want to take an equity stake in your company, which I was delighted to accept, So that's how the whole, venture funding started in Biocon.
So of course, when you have those kinds of successes at an early stage, it's like rocket fuel, isn't it? It propels you into a different stratosphere with great momentum. Now, obviously, you had great advisors by this time and advising you that the market was ready for Biocon to do an IPO. Did you feel that you'd have this incredible success at the IPO? I mean, something like 33% oversubscribed?
Not really. I mean, I was very excited to go to the market, and what was very interesting was the process or the run-up to that IPO, which was really quite a great experience and a great learning experience for me. But I had no idea the kind of market response we would get to our IPO, or the $1 billion market cap that we attained on day one of our listing. I mean, we had basically valued the business at about maybe $500 to $600 million, even though that was quite a large value to kind of peg to this business. But I was quite confident we could get to that kind of a market cap because of all that we were doing. But what was really, really rewarding for me was on the first day of listing, when we suddenly saw our share price zoom to $1 billion market cap.
Original thought process when you started as an entrepreneur come to your mind? The gender issues, this IPO that was going to go out there, run by this chairman and managing director who's a woman in a business that perhaps is slowly being understood by the Indian market. Did all these thoughts go through your mind as you did this IPO?
Not really, because I was so fixated on just the IPO that it never crossed my mind about being a woman or, anything. I was actually very excited that biotech had arrived. For me, the importance was that India finally had a biotech stock listed on the market.
We'll take a short break, be right back, talking to Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. Welcome back. We're at the fabulous Leela Palace Hotel here in Bangalore, the home of my guest today, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw. Obviously, your goal and vision right from the beginning, to be able to get to this stage. And of course, the IPO thing came up at a time when you were sort of transforming your business to go into pharmaceuticals as well. Is that something that you had at the back of your mind when you started Biocon?
Not at all, Vijay. I mean, I always say that, look, entrepreneurship is such an evolutionary process that you never know what you're going to next do. And I also believe as an entrepreneur, you've got to reinvent yourself. So I started with enzymes and, I ended up with biopharmaceuticals. I think the future is also going to be very different. It depends what kind of biopharmaceuticals I'm next going to get into. But, I think you've got to keep pace with emerging opportunities. I think you've got to keep challenging the status quo. You've got to keep challenging your business model. And I think it's very evolutionary. I don't think you can predict beyond maybe 3 to 5 years at a time.
Kiran, we've talked about business, we've talked about your entrepreneurship and all of that. And now at this stage in your career, you're a major philanthropist, you've done a lot of things in the industry and outside. What would be your main focus?
I really feel that when you reach this level of success in whatever you're doing, I think you've got to give back to society. So obviously, you know, I am a philanthropist. I want to bring about change. I do believe that those of us who are very fortunate to really effect change should do it. And therefore, I believe that my philanthropy at the moment is about making a difference in healthcare. And therefore, I've set up a large cancer center called the Mazumdar Shaw Cancer Center, which I've partnered with another very eminent and legendary Dr. Devi Shetty.
Yes, of course.
And I think that's where we're making a big difference to cancer care in this country, because as you know, cancer is a very expensive disease to treat. And I think in a country like India, you just have to develop a new model for cancer care. So that's what I'm trying to do at the Mazumdar Shaw Cancer Center.
Is it more on a research basis? Are you looking for that cure that we're all looking for?
Well, one of my mandates for the hospital was to create a translational research center, which we have, because I felt that in India we don't do enough research. And I believe that we are only using hospitals to treat disease, but we're not researching disease enough. Now, other than that, I've also focused a lot on primary health care in rural India, because again, I'm very concerned with the fact that a country like India does not have a national healthcare system. And that, you know, when you look at the people who are excluded from access to basic healthcare, it's pitiable, because you see that, you know, the number one cause for indebtedness, whether it's in rural India or whether it's in even urban India with the poor, I think it is illness. I think when people fall ill, their life savings are used to treat the illness. I'm trying to run pilots which the government can then scale up.
What would you say to young entrepreneurs trying to build a life, as you have done over the last 30, 40 years? What advice would you seriously give them to say, you know, besides just following your dreams and hard work, is there something that you can sort of hang your hat on?
Well, I certainly want to send a strong message to young people saying that entrepreneurship is truly a very self-fulfilling and very exciting journey for any young person to pursue, because I always say to young people, try not to be a job seeker. Try to be a job creator, because that's what an entrepreneur is. An entrepreneur creates jobs, an entrepreneur creates opportunities, and an entrepreneur realizes dreams, which I don't think you can do as a job seeker.
Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, wonderful talking to you. True inspiration.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you so much.
Here.
It's been a pleasure.
Lovely.
You can also watch this episode online at louisphilippe.com.